On May 6th, 2021, I put out what I would say was my first really firm RDNA 3 leak, and it honestly wasn't super detailed, but it didn't attempt to be. All I wanted to do was dispel some of the most pessimistic and overhyped whispers out there because I already felt like they were getting quite silly in multiple directions regarding RDNA 3. You see, there were many people acting like RDNA 3 was going to triple or even quadruple performance over RDNA 2, and others were doubtful AMD could even increase performance more than 30% gen over gen when they had just doubled performance over RDNA 1. And I made it clear in that video that literally no one at AMD nor anyone who works with people at AMD expected an uplift lower than 40% over the 6900 XT, and also the most optimistic sources did not expect more than a rough doubling of performance in conjunction with an at least 50% boost in performance per watt. Now, that may not sound like much, especially given what we've seen today. It's like, well, duh, that's what ended up happening. Anyone could have guessed that, but I was actually attacked a lot last year for supposedly underhyping RDNA 3 and Lovelace as well, actually. But it's interesting. RDNA 3 may be disappointing to some people, but I actually think that we're going to see AMD fanboys, before the RDNA 3 launch and reviews come out, overhype and downplay what AMD is clearly telegraphing as an initial launch that's weaker than Lovelace, while other people miss the forest for the trees that there's clearly a lot of gas left in the RDNA 3 tank that AMD is holding in reserve to launch against any future 4090 Ti. Which, let's be clear, Nvidia does have a stronger card coming, and AMD knows that. They can enable more CUDA cores on 8102 for the 4090 Ti. They can use much faster memory. They're not going to go to like 800 watts or something, but they can certainly go a bit over 450 watts if they want to. And, well, if you're AMD, if you know you're not going to win ray tracing, which what we've seen today is they clearly aren't going to, then I don't think there's a point in going for peak performance and trying to win raster if you can't also win ray tracing, because you're just not going to be able to argue you have the strongest card. It's clear Nvidia will be close in raster no matter how hard AMD pushes the card, even if they take the raster crown overall, which I'll get to that later in the video. I think they definitely could, but Nvidia is always going to be able to argue a much bigger win in ray tracing, and so it's never going to be a firmly marketable thing that your card is the strongest. And, well, yeah, I'm going to talk about all of that, future releases and supply later in the video. Right now, let me actually go through what AMD literally confirmed today. And, well, ray tracing, I want to start with that. I want to start with the most disappointing thing that I saw confirmed today out of AMD. And look, it's not a small increase in performance, ray tracing with RDNA 3 over RDNA 2. And to give AMD credit, I actually do think the way they're portraying the ray tracing increase is a much more realistic portrayal of what people can expect. You know, it's not like Nvidia's theoretical increases they've shown that you'll never see in like any real game. They showed that ray tracing is 50% better for a compute unit. And if we do the math, considering it has more compute units, you can see that, yeah, it's almost double the ray tracing performance. But I have to admit that honestly falls a bit short of what my expectations were. I never doubled down on an exact number for ray tracing, but I did expect them to come closer to Lovelace than this. I thought they'd lose, but, you know, this was something that no one at AMD would directly confirm. They'd give me raster estimations and like some specs, but there was never anyone saying this is what the ray tracing will be, except that it would lose to a Lovelace. And so I relied on just talking to some silicon engineers at various companies, you know, like theoretically, what do you expect? And, you know, I was basically told that at a minimum, if AMD did the just the minimum tweaks you would expect to scale ray tracing performance a little better than raster, then they should at least around double ray tracing performance over RDNA 2, and that's all they've done at best. And I have to say that is a bit disappointing to me. But it does explain the aggressive pricing. Let's hit on that now. AMD today announced that the 7900 XT would be $900, which was the lowest price I heard it could be. And I will be honest, I thought it was going to be $1,000 for the 7900 XT, and I thought it was going to be like $1,200 for the 7900 XTX. This is aggressive, but it's for a reason. AMD knows that, well, the 7900 XTX is going to blow the 4080 out of the water when it comes to rasterization performance, and that even the 7900 XT is probably going to at least tie the 4080 in raster, if not beat it slightly. that in ray tracing, the 4080 is going to definitely beat the 7900 XT, and they don't really have a gigantic efficiency win probably over the 4080 with the 7900 XT, especially when you turn up ray tracing, although the 7900 XTX will be much more efficient, I think. And so, as long as Nvidia has the performance crown and more mindshare, it's in their best interest to be aggressive. But let's be very clear about that. Today, AMD is being aggressive because they can. I do not believe these cards, the 7900 XT or the XTX, have bad margins. I think they have excellent margins. And, it's a fact at this point. AMD has better margins than Intel, around 50% on average. This is not going to stray from that. I believe these cards are going to have, maybe not, I don't know if it's 50%, but they're going to have solid margins, and these are going to be prices AMD can stick to. So, well, we should definitely be happy AMD isn't going full Nvidia mode with their pricing this generation. They're not doing that for a reason, but they're also not doing that completely out of generosity. RDNA 3 costs way less than Lovelace to make, and they can actually just afford to charge only this much. And so that's really the argument AMD is clearly going for with RDNA 3. They are going for better efficiency, which it looks incredibly impressive, especially considering this is a multi-die architecture. You lose some efficiency sending data between two different dies on different nodes. That's crazy that they're able to at least match or beat Lovelace in efficiency with a clearly smaller overall die with similar at least raster performance to the 4090, at least in 1440p. That's really impressive. And because that's what's actually impressive, their efficiency, their price performance, that's what they're going to focus on to market this against Nvidia. Well, in addition to the technology advantage they have with DisplayPort 2.1, which some people thought that was a crazy thing to suggest, but when I saw AMD was actually going to have 2.1 while Nvidia's only on 1.4, I knew this was going to be a solid marketing opportunity for AMD. Look, at the end of the day, RDNA 3 offers a level of performance that doesn't match the 4090 yet. We'll get into what's coming later in the video, but it does manage to give you a pretty hilariously good performance in 4K while actually letting you power higher frame rates than Nvidia. No, not in the latest AAA games coming out in like 2023 or something. Maybe not on Ultra like 4K 200. Well, there's plenty of games people play that are 1, 2, 3 years old, and only RDNA 3 is going to allow you to run those games above 4K 200 with a DisplayPort that actually works well, all the way up to like 4K 480. That's something that only AMD is going to be able to offer, and I do think these graphics cards, while not as strong as this 4090, I mean, they're still incredibly powerful and can power most of your games well above like 400 frames per second, unless you're in 8K. And so this is a very real marketing opportunity for AMD. And I got to say, Scott Herkelman was quite cheeky about it during the presentation.
There's no need to rebuild your desktop, no need to upgrade your case, and there's no need for a new power adapter. Previous generation enthusiast GPUs, including those recently launched by our competitor, only support DisplayPort 1.4. But with the RX 7900 series of GPUs, it'll allow you to actually see the frames you are paying for.
And honestly, though, I don't blame him for being cheeky. I think the points he's making about not being able to fit 4090s and 4080s that use the same reference cooler in your case, those are fair points. I'm told that there are gamers bringing their cards back to Micro Centers and returning them because they cannot fit them in their case. This is a real marketing point. This isn't just jabs. This is a problem for Nvidia. AMD has the more efficient cards that fit into existing systems without a problematic power connector, cards that cost like almost half as much at the extreme examples, the 7900 XT versus the 4090. And so, yeah, I think these are very real marketing decisions. I think that my overall opinion, honestly, on RDNA 3, the initial launch cards that they have, is that the best is yet to come when it comes to RDNA 3. There's clearly a lot of gas left in the tank. But if you're an enthusiast gamer, this gets you a level of 4K performance that is pretty close to the top Lovelace card without having to make a bunch of compromises. And yeah, I guess I want to start getting into that, though. I have RTX 4080 supply information. I have an analysis I want to tell you about when it comes to a 7950 XTX, how much stronger AMD can make Navi 31 if they really went for it and were willing to charge a bit more money. And I actually have some whispers about RDNA 4, but first, an ad from a sponsor. Looking to build a website? Consider choosing the one that's so easy to use, my dog can use it. This piece of content is sponsored by Squarespace. Squarespace allows you to pick from a series of templates that are each structured to cultivate a different type of website that you yourself can then tailor to your needs. Whether you're building an interactive resume to get hired this fall or building a website for an existing business, Squarespace offers powerful features like members areas, allowing you to segment content that's sold to followers, online stores with options for both physical and digital products, and SEO tools to track your business and make informed decisions on how you can best grow it. Head to squarespace.com/Moore's Law is Dead to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using code Moore's Law is Dead. Clicking on this link and using this code greatly helps the channel, and it helps you launch your next venture. Support Moore's Law is Dead and your online presence with Squarespace today. All right then, so I addressed the AMD enthusiast graphics cards coming out this year. What about graphics cards coming out next year? What about Nvidia graphics cards coming out this year that still haven't been launched? What about the RTX 4080? Well, I'm sorry, I just don't think I'm going to be able to recommend the RTX 4080 16GB, the real one, not the 12GB that's been canceled, to almost anybody. I just think that it's going to use similar size coolers to the 4090. It's going to cost more than the 7900 XTX. It's going to use about the same amount of energy. I expect the AIB models to use about the same amount of energy as reference 7900 XTXs. And yes, that's it. But that doesn't mean that I don't think Nvidia will be able to sell all the 4080s they launched this year for two main reasons. Number one, they're going to be able to pretend that DLSS 3 makes the 4080 better than the 7900 XTX in the handful of games it's in right now. Which, yeah, look, AMD has FSR 3 coming, and it will have a frame interpolation tech if you want fake frames to be farted out that look like DALL-E pictures. But I don't think most gamers want that. But the Nvidia faithful will probably buy into Nvidia's marketing, and FSR 3, although it probably will be impressive and it probably will work on everyone's cards fine without a flow accelerator, it's not coming out this holiday season. This holiday season, Nvidia is the only one with a 3.0 tech, and it's only going to work on the 4090 and the 4080, and so I think they'll be able to market that fine. But that's the first reason I think the 4080 will sell out fine this holiday season, even though I'm not going to recommend it. The second is that actually I don't think it's going to be easy to get your hands on one because Nvidia is not going to ship as many as the 4090. So let me actually throw some quotes on screen here. Not everyone entirely agrees yet, but it's early. And if we take all of the sources I've talked to together, I actually think the picture is pretty clear. Now, I have one source at a major retailer that tells me they've been briefed to prepare for an early opening and large day one stock for the RTX 4080. I don't have exact numbers yet, but I do expect to get them. And when I do, I'll be able to confirm, relatively how much it is. But another source who is deep in the supply chain actually gave me a rough estimate that on day one, globally, the 4080 will have 20 to 40% less stock than the 4090, which isn't as bad as it sounds compared to how horrible recent high-end launches have been over the past couple of years, but that is a little odd that it's less than the 4090, considering the 4090 costs more. Usually it's just less stock the more expensive a card gets until you get to the bottom where the entry-level cards aren't expected to sell as much. And then it's made even worse by the fact that I'm told that there will be less resupplies arriving for the 4080 compared to the 4090 this holiday season, and the reason's pretty clear. Nvidia wants to have somewhat of a real launch for the 4080 so no one complains, but once they have that launch, they want to push people towards Ampere this holiday season and in January. And, well, another source tells me they don't expect there to be enough stock, only saying bad things, worse than the 4090. And another source, one of my best ones, saying that, well, it probably won't be an Ampere-like launch. It's going to be on the smaller side, and even said that it might be a bad high-end launch in general, if not really arguably a paper one. And so, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is if you're one of those people that looked at RDNA 3 and for some reason you don't want to pay $1,600 for a 4090, but you also don't want to pay almost half as much for a 7900 XT and you need Nvidia, then I would recommend you be ready on the 4080 launch day, as it is probably going to sell out quicker than the 4090 did, or at least it has the potential to. Even though I don't think it will get as good reviews, I do think that there will be less stock, and if you don't get it on day one, you're probably not going to be able to get it for a while. But ultimately, I don't think this matters that much. When I look at the current enthusiast landscape this holiday season, I feel like you're either somebody who wants the best, which if you want the best, well, that's the 4090. The 4090 is the best. Just get that and be careful with what connector you use so you don't burn your house down. But then to like 90% of enthusiast gamers, and I say enthusiast because even if you're a high-end gamer, I'm sorry, I think discount RDNA 2 and even some Ampere cards are the way to go. I consider that the 6900 XT is going for close to like $650 now in the US. The 6700 XT is getting close to $350. That's what you should get if you care about price performance and you don't need the best. But if you want something close to the best, and you're not willing to pay through the nose for a 4090 that's already hard to get right now, then I would recommend the 7900 XTX and the 7900 XT. And I would say just ignore the 4080. It's overpriced. It's oversized. It's going to be harder to get because I do believe, as I leaked earlier this week, that AMD, maybe not on week one, but by the end of December, we'll have decent RDNA 3 supply flowing. Just get RDNA 3 if you're an enthusiast gamer that does need the best. But let's say you're pretty happy with your system right now, but you don't want to try hard to get an enthusiast card this holiday season, and you're willing to wait if AMD has something better on the way. What would that better thing be from AMD? How much gas, as I've been hinting at earlier in this video, how much gas is left in the tank for a 7950 XTX? I actually think there's a lot of gas left in that tank, baby. So if we look at the bandwidth that you're going to get out of the 7900 XTX. My understanding, what I'm told, and what has been leaked, I believe, by other people as well, is that they're going to use 20 gigabit per second GDR6, which earlier this year I said was going to be the average kind of GDR6, even maybe budget speed RAM this holiday season, and that's what AMD is using. Well, already right now, there's 24 gigabit per second memory out there, allowing for AMD to go for a 20% bandwidth boost if they want to, and there's 27 gigabit per second on the way that would allow AMD to boost raw bandwidth with just GDR6 by another 35% over the 7900 XTX. And then consider, and at least based on what Angstrom has said, which, guys, he's been dead on with his leaks on RDNA 3. I think we should assume this is most likely true. Based on what Angstrom has said, and based on what I've been able to confirm with a couple people I talked to at AMD myself as well, they can stack more Infinity Cache on Navi 31 if they want to, going up to 192 megabytes of Infinity Cache, doubling it. They still haven't done that. They've gone for price, performance, and manufacturability with their initial enthusiast launch with RDNA 3. Then consider that they're only going up to 355 watts. I think trying to hit kind of peak performance per watt with their flagship or close to that, they can go to 450 watts. And I've already leaked earlier this week. I'm asked again today. There are AIBs coming with cards that have 3 8-pins and over 400 watts of power consumption. I've even heard some people suggest 500 watts for some of them. That is a 27% power consumption boost they can bring to the table as well. And remember, the 6950 XT added 11% more performance over the 6900 XT with the 11% more power consumption. I do not believe the 7900 XTX is really outside of the efficiency curve. I believe that they could push 27% more power consumption to boost possibly 20% higher. I'm not willing to double down on exact peak clock speeds. I don't think they're ever going to hit 4 gigahertz like some people have suggested, but I do think they can definitely hit 3. So there's no way around it. They can bring 20 or even 35% more GDR6 bandwidth. They can double the Infinity Cache, and they can up clocks a lot. I am pretty dang confident here. A 7950 XTX would bring you at least 15% more performance over the 7900 XTX, and it could even get up to 30% at higher resolutions, making it pretty firmly beat the 4090 and raster, and that would be just about enough to indeed double 6900 XT performance, if not a little over double. They just haven't done it yet because that cooling would cost a lot more. They don't want to handle that cooling on the reference coolers, at least not right now, and they don't think gamers want this. And I agree. I think gamers would rather have something, like a, what is it, like depending on which card you're talking about, like a 60 to 80% better enthusiast card around $1,000 than something that is the full 100% that costs $1,500. And again, especially if you know Nvidia also has some gas left in the tank with 8102 as well. Do I think they have as much gas left in the tank? No, I think they can enable, like another 10% CUDA cores, of course, and then use maybe 10 to 20% faster memory. I guess maybe GDDR7 if they wait long enough for that to be ready next year. But I just don't see them being able to add as much performance because they're closer to the power consumption wall than AMD is. And so either way, it's going to be close. Might as well wait to see exactly where Nvidia is willing to go, how RDNA 3's initial lineup sells before you decide how much more you're willing to spend to make a crazy flagship. And I do believe that's what AMD is doing right now, because Nvidia just is competitive, and you can't go all out if you've got a big price performance advantage until you know how far you've got to go all out. That would just be reckless. But while I say that Nvidia is very competitive this generation, and they are, although Nvidia is certainly not problem-free with their Lovelace launches, they are definitely still competitive despite not using chiplets like AMD is. What about the upcoming generations? Well, I have to say, I've been saying all year that AMD has an economics advantage with RDNA 3. And although it hasn't been clear who will take what performance crowns, that of course it's still going to be close, that AMD is just going to be able to price their products lower this gen. And I think it's only going to get worse in the future. And actually, let me put a quote on screen. I actually have been saving a little RDNA 4 whisper for today's video after the RDNA 3 reveal. One of my best sources, one of the people who has been instrumental in actually some visual leaks that I've had in the past, told me a few months ago that Navi 4, or at least the Navi 4 that was being worked on, there's always going to be an RDNA 4, but at least that iteration of it may have been on the chopping block and be getting redefined in lieu of accelerating the release of some sort of RDNA 3 Plus refresh. That RDNA 3 Plus refresh was, again, basically the same as RDNA 3 on paper, but using an enhanced node, that would allow for much higher clocks, and coming with a few tweaks. Now, I don't know, this source doesn't know if that RDNA 3 Plus desktop generation is canceled. There still could maybe be one next year, but at a minimum now, Navi 4, the one he was initially working on a bit, is back on track and possibly even more ambitious than before. But the additional changes they're making to it, it's been pushed back. I always heard that RDNA 4 was like a very end of 2023, very beginning of 2024 product. It now sounds like it's going to be more like a mid-2024 launch at best, and it might even slip to late 2024, but that it's coming, and it is going to be another big increase in performance. And so I'm not going to double down on what that is going to be. I've already done the early RDNA 4 leak. I stand by everything I said in that video about RDNA 4. I expect the performance increase of RDNA 4 to at least be around RDNA 3, if not better. And I think it's going to be very hard for Nvidia to compete with. I'm sorry, I just don't see how Nvidia can compete on paper anymore. They've pulled all of the levers there are to pull. They've been using massive die sizes for generation after generation. They've now ramped up power consumption to levels that they even had to back down a bit right before the Lovelace launch because they were melting power supplies, and they still kind of are. And they're using arguably the most expensive node you can try to use for dies this big. They're even using the more advanced memory than AMD. They've brute force with a massive amount of cache. That's why their die is so big with Lovelace. There's not really anywhere left to go in competing with AMD's chiplets with a monolithic design. Next year, I don't really see Nvidia getting to 3 nanometer yet. I think what they're going to be forced to decide if they want to do is if they're going to launch some kind of like N4X Lovelace refresh at the end of 2023 that tries to boost performance like another 30% and preempt the RDNA 4 launch, but it's still going to have horrible power consumption, I think, compared to AMD. Or they're going to have to launch some insanely expensive, gigantic 3 nanometer monolithic design around the same launch time frame as RDNA 4. Well, AMD is using all of these other levers they can pull to increase performance while not ruining power consumption because they are getting chiplets working on graphics cards. And, it's funny. This is something that's been confirmed by John Petty. I recommend that Broken Silicon episode where he directly confirms that he does not think NVIDIA's next generation is going to use chiplets yet. But unless there's some surprise with that, Before RDNA 2 came out, I said that if Nvidia wins, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. And I think I was right generally in terms of performance per watt, but the ability for Nvidia to pump out seemingly endless Ampere cards from Samsung during the shortage ensured that Nvidia's Pyrrhic victory in performance per watt was not a Pyrrhic victory in market share. They took market share from AMD, but I don't think they can do that anymore. Now they're being forced to use the most expensive nodes with giant die sizes. That means that even if they can pump out a lot of cards, they're competing with a lot of other products from Apple for that best node, meaning they can't pump out as many, and it's going to cost way more. And so I do think it's up for debate if I was right about saying Ampere was a Pyrrhic victory for Nvidia. I don't know if it was, but I don't think this time it is anything but a Pyrrhic victory for Nvidia. When I look at the 4090 against the 7900 XTX, and I shudder to think about how Blackwell is going to attempt to stack up against a potential RDNA 3 Plus, RDNA 4, or RDNA 5. All right, that is going to do it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy the video, make sure you are subscribed to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel so you don't miss the upcoming leaks and the upcoming coverage. A lot more content is coming down the pipe. I actually have a pretty big surprise leak coming out early next week, followed by another big leak about a different company we haven't been talking about today that I'm really excited to talk about. And so yeah, a lot of you, you're sometimes accidentally unsubscribed somehow by YouTube, or you actually haven't subscribed yet. That really helps me. Subscribe if you haven't. And if you have any extra money, like $2, $4 a month, consider supporting Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. You'll get early ad-free access to Broken Silicon, the ability to ask me and guest questions, the ability to chat with me and other fans on the Moore's Law is Dead Discord after these videos come out. And actually, after this video comes out, if you become a patron, you can submit reader mails to an upcoming die shrink that drops tomorrow with me and Dan, the usual co-host of Broken Silicon, talking about our initial reactions to RDNA 3's reveal, along with tons of feedback from the community. You can be part of that community. You can be a part of that episode if you join the Patreon right after this video comes out and submit your questions. And then you can also submit questions for a few days before the new Broken Silicon comes out. And you'll get it early and ad-free. But all right, I'm starting to ramble. All of that's there for you guys if you have the extra money. But either way, thank you for watching.